So I start out with a 4x4 centimeter square stock, and it's 10 centimeter long. I mark out the center for punching the eye of the axe. I take my time here to get the initial set right. It's important to get the punch centered to the billet, but if you do slip a little bit, it can be worked out later on during the rough forging process. As you can see, I'm starting to use heavier blows, and here I have punched the hole, so I'm moving on to a drift. And this is one of the smaller drifts that I use to make the hole, the eye bigger, and then I can start forging out the axe a little bit. We'll get to that in a second. If you have a problem getting the drift out, you can just hit the hammer part of the axe and it should come out pretty easy. As you can see. Here I'm moving on to the final drift that I use. I should definitely have a handle on that, but I'm too lazy for that at the moment. So here I am drifting out the eye to what's going to become the finished shape. But I take my time. I don't go it all the way right here. I take it step by step. So I'm starting just to drift the eye a little bit. Then I will do some other parts of the axe, and then I will go back to drift the eye to the final shape, and I will explain that later. I begin to slightly form the hammer part of the axe. It's important to do that pretty early on, in my opinion. Here I'm starting to forge out the cheeks or ears, or what you want to call them, of the axe. So I'm beginning to forge out the main body of the axe. Or the blade part of the axe, basically. slowly but steady you can see how it's starting to turn into an axe. And now, since I've been forging a bit, the eye has closed a little bit, and this is why I said you don't want to do all the drifting in the beginning. At least I don't want to do that. So I take my time and do a little at a time and start forging out the blade of the axe, and then I go back because it will close itself a little bit, and it's no problem if it does, but you don't want too much of like of a cold shot inside there. So. Now, I forgot to say that in the beginning, but this is mild steel that I'm using, so I am going to forge weld in a high carbon steel bit, in this case a piece of Damascus. And what I'm doing now is basically trying to shape it roughly to the dimension that I have. It's still very thick, but we'll change that pretty soon. So now I'm forging the part that's closest to the eye, because that can be pretty hard sometimes to get to, especially if you do, and you do want to have your drift in, so you can shape that around the drift, which basically means that the eye stays the way that you want it to be. So, and in my opinion, that's an important part to forge out, depending on what kind of axe you're making. In this case, it's forest axe, so I wanted to keep it kind of thin, not like a Dane axe thin, but pretty thin. Right, so this is the rough forging of the axe. We will get to more of that later, but first some Damascus. I'm starting out with 15 and 20 and 10 95 billet of 12 stacks. And we're gonna do it 2 times, so we're gonna forge weld it first and then stack it once more to get 24 layers. So what I'm just doing now is brushing off all the scale and applying some borax-ish, which I got from my friend who makes his own. And I am applying a bit too much because I'm nervous. I haven't done this in quite a while, so. And it's the first time I'm trying the new kind of borax that my friend gave me. Starting off, just tapping, very quick heats, nothing more than that. Now I just wire brush it and apply some more borax, and back into the fire it goes. So, especially for the like 5 first heats, I want to keep it very short, just to get the initial weld, and then I can go at it more. So see, I have a little bit more force in my blows. And if you are unsure about forge welding temperatures, one thing that you can watch is when I take out the billet, it's like smoking, as you can see. That's a very good indication, at least to me, that it's hot enough for forge welding. At this point the billet is probably already forge weld, so I think it can begin to hit it with more force. And the initial test you can do is to flip it on the side, so you're and try to hit it, and if it falls apart then you didn't make it, but if it doesn't, you probably made it. So, but you should always double check it later with a grinder to see if it's a one solid piece. As you can see here, I've turned the billet upside and hit it that way just to see if it stays, which it does. So I'm cutting the billet lengthwise because it's a very thick or wide material. Otherwise, 5 centimeters, it's a little bit too wide for me. So I'm stacking them up lengthwise. It's gonna be a little bit more easy to work. So same process over again. Some people actually use wooden hammers to do this initial weld. I just go to my lightest hammer that I have, which is a 1 kilo hammer. And I also tried forge welding in my gas forge and it worked great. Here you can see I have cut an initial line in the axe, body of the axe. And I cut that open maybe 1.5 centimeter. And that's where the billet will go later. So I heat up the axe now and I forge it kind of cold, shutting it again. I don't want to forge weld it now, but what it does is that it draws out, so I have more material that will go around the billet. Now I reopen it with a chisel tool. And this trick I learned from Torbjörn Åman. I don't know if he invented it, he probably didn't, but that's where I saw it first, and it's been a very good trick if you're interested in forge welding. So I now shape the Damascus billet into the end bit that I'm going to use. And here you can see I have opened it up again, and I'm taking the billet, which I have ground. It's important to get off the scale at least. You don't have to grind it like I did, but I'm on the nervous side of people, so I do it that way. Now I'm heating up the body of the axe, and I'm punching in the end bit. That will like form the end bit's part to the body of the axe, so it will fit better, basically. And I'm closing it up right now. Now I begin the forge welding process. End bit to axe. Very carefully. Very small, light taps just to get it forge welded. Here I'm taking the chisel and just cutting it off with a hot cut tool, or what you call it. Cutting off the excess material. Now you can see it's starting to look like an axe. Rough forging the blade of the axe a little bit, getting the initial bevels in, and yeah, just rough forging the axe basically. And also working the eye, doing the finishing touches on the eye of the axe, seeing that everything's straight and the thickness that I want. Also using the eye of the axe to the drift to see that it aligns and that it's not crooked or anything like that. This is the time to fix that. Here I have a template which I use because I have like a I use the same template for all my forest axes, and I'm drawing around it basically, so I can get approximately the same design all the time. So a bit too much material, but here we go. You should use a mask doing this. I usually do, but I forgot it this time while filming. So here we have some Swedish moser birch, I think it's called, which is a very beautiful kind of wood. It's not optimal for axes, but I would use ash instead usually. But this is kind of a special axe. It's supposed to be pretty, but still functional. So here I'm just seeing so that the axe aligns and I get the initial so it sits where I want it to sit. And this, people do this very differently. I find this method to work pretty good for me. So I keep the wood very thick. That way, as you can see, I can align the edge of the axe to see that it's straight along the wood. So if it's a little bit crooked or anything or off, I can fix that later then. And I haven't put on the axe properly yet. It's just sitting where it's going to sit later, but I haven't wedged it or anything yet. So I'm gonna take it off later. But I use it as a help to see that I'm true in the lines and stuff like that. So here I'm beginning to roughly grind in the bevel of the axe. Now this is a Damascus edged axe, and I haven't done that ever before, so I'm a bit unsure how to do it and how much to grind. And here I just do a tempering, not tempering, normalizing cycle. I do that 3 times. And now I'm getting into the heat treat. I'm trying to only heat up the edge part of the axe, since it's a mild steel body. So here we go. I'm tempering in one of those, I think it's called rapeseed oil. Works like a charm. I do that to see that it's hardened properly. If it bites, it's not hard enough. But it could be. But if it skates off, it's probably pretty hot. I use my forge here to temper the axe. So it's a bit tricky situation. Usually I just use the oven to do it, but I wanted to try it. And here is the result. Usually I don't use 1095 in my axes. I usually use 50, 160 or C45-ish. A little bit less carbon steel. So here I'm finishing off the profiles. You don't have to do this, but it's just that I like to have all the profile sides of it, or what you say. I want those to be shiny, basically, and I want to keep a rough forged like body. if you understand. You will see later. Here I'm doing the sharpening, the fine grip belt, and after this I go to the buffing wheel on my belt grinder to get off the burr, and it's razor sharp after that. So time for the etch. So I'm etching in ferric chloride, I think it's called, to see the initial pattern of the Damascus billet. So I do this 3 times of cycles of 20 minutes. And after each cycle, I grind it. I use some sandpaper, fine grit sandpaper, just to see the pattern. And then back in the acid. So here I'm putting on the handle, which I shaped with files and a little bit on the belt grinder. Here I use a Moser birch wedge, not the best wedge material, shall say. I usually go with something stronger. It almost broke on me. And here we have some linseed oil. I usually let it sit in there for like a day, just to really soak in the linseed oil inside the wood. And it's important to oil your axe handle pretty often. And here you can see the finished result. Thank you very much for watching, and excuse my bad English.